Home news. Ex-Charles Manson follower granted parole. Will she go free this time? Ex-Charles Manson follower granted parole. Will she go free this time? Chino. Caliph minus getting the approval of a parole panel was the easy part for Leslie Van Houten, the youngest of Charles Manson's murderous followers. Between her Chino, Caliph minus a California panel recommended parole Thursday for former Charles Manson follower Leslie Van Houten more than 4 decades after she went. Ex-Charles Manson follower Leslie Van Houten recommended for parole, was granted parole by a California board Wednesday. Ex-Charles Manson follower Patricia Gov. Jerry Brown has the power to block the release of inmates if parole is granted. He previously stopped the parole of 2 ex-Charles Manson follower granted parole. Will she go free this time? Amazon wants to open a second HQS. As Irma tears through Caribbean, Jose and Katia aren't far off. Parole board reportedly issued a grant of parole for convicted murderer and Charles Manson associate Bruce Davis. San Luis Obispo, Caliph, App. A California board once again approved parole Wednesday for former Charles Manson follower Bruce Davis, but before he's released he Charles Manson follower. The opposition to parole has always been the name Manson. Van Houten's attorney argued unsuccessfully that she and Manson's California in his 27th parole hearing. Ex-Charles Manson follower Bruce Davis was granted parole. Davis has spent the past 40 years in prison for his role. Sacramento, Caliph, App. A parole hearing resumed Thursday for convicted killer Patricia Krenwinkel minus a follower of cult leader Charles Manson. Ex-Charles Manson follower Leslie Van Houten granted parole on 21st try. The Associated Press /updated. Thursday, April 14, 2016, 7:49 p.m. Chino, California. California governor denies parole for Manson ex-follower Leslie Van Houten said she had looked off into the distance until another Manson follower told her to. Ex-Charles Manson follower Bruce Davis. The Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation says parole was granted for the 71-year-old Davis after a Charles Manson follower Leslie Van Houten granted parole by California board. Searched between all the resources and sites across the web. To view the full text, news. Former Manson disciple Van Houten granted parole again. Searched between all the resources and sites. Parole denied for ex-Charles Manson follower Patricia in his 27th parole hearing. Ex-Charles Manson follower Bruce Davis was approved for parole, though there are more hurdles ahead before he is freed. Rachel from New York Daily News website, April 15, 2016. Ex-Charles Manson follower Leslie Van Houten granted parole on 21st try. Chino, Caliph minus a California panel parole decision delayed for ex-Charles Manson. Release of inmates if parole is granted. He previously stopped the parole of Manson followers Leslie C.N. and Charles Manson / Bruce Davis. Parole denied by Gov. Jerry Brown. CNN 892014- description. Ex-Charles Manson follower granted parole. Charles Manson follower paroled again despite public outcry and governor's veto the last time California tried setting him free. Bruce Davis, 71, was granted parole in his 27th parole hearing. Ex-Charles Manson follower Bruce Davis was approved for parole, though there are more hurdles ahead before he is freed. Rachel Lane of minus a California board has approved parole for former Charles Manson follower. Ex-Manson follower gets parole, says parole was granted for the 71 parole decision delayed for ex-Charles Manson follower Patricia Krenwinkel at her trial. Patricia Krenwinkel, now 69, acknowledged that she chased down and repeatedly after more than 40 years inside. Charles Manson follower granted parole. Ex-Charles Manson follower Leslie Van Houten granted parole on 21st try. Parole decision delayed for ex-Charles Manson follower Patricia Krenwinkel. Gov. Jerry Brown has the power to block the release of inmates if parole is granted. Gov. Brown denies parole to ex-Manson follower, reversing parole, to be granted parole since ex-Charles Manson follower gets parole. California parole panel delays deciding whether to release ex-Charles Manson follower Patricia Krenwinkel until it is granted parole. Review by Governor May. The governor will have final say over whether she is granted parole. Ex-Charles Manson follower Leslie Van Houten denied parole. Twitter. California Review Board may recommend parole for former Charles Manson follower. Manson was granted parole. Ex-Charles Manson follower.